So now, today's program is brought to you by ANS Advanced Network Services. ANS, headquartered in Albany, New York, is a turnkey engineering, furnishing, and installation provider of telecommunications solutions. The services ANS offers include in-building wireless, tower services, network infrastructure, and DC power systems. ANS has demonstrated success with small projects all the way to multi-million-dollar building expansions, raw land builds, and campus wireless deployments. The company also provides communication systems for the DC power system test and turn up, as well as 24/7 maintenance and monitoring services. ANS's turnkey solutions are provided to its customers spanning the entire telecommunications industry, enterprise IT, the data center community, healthcare services industry, and higher education. Geographically, the ANS suite of services spans from Chicago to the Northeast and down the entire East Coast with as-needed support nationwide. And to provide the best customer service and project management, ANS has warehouse and office locations in Albany and Queens, New York, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Columbus, Ohio, and Springfield, Illinois. I am now pleased to present to you today's program, Building Reliable Connections, Human-Based Monitoring Solution. And I'm honored to introduce you to our host and moderator, Paul Fatuccia, the President and General Manager for ANS. Now, if you don't know Paul, he has enjoyed a very successful 30-year career, rising the ranks from Time Warner Cable Field Technician to Intermediate Communications Engineering Manager to today. Since taking over as President and General Manager of ANS in 2013, Paul has led an aggressive expansion of the company's services and footprint. In his first 18 months, Paul added over 40 new employees, extended the company's physical presence into the Florida and Mid-Atlantic regions, and added T-Mobile, AT&T, and Sprint to a robust account roster that already included Verizon Wireless. Additionally, Paul has made ANS a fast-growing provider in the important distributed antenna systems market segment. Now, joining Paul today are two Kens. Our first Ken is Ken Hosick. Ken Hosick is the Vice President of IoT Strategy and Business Development at Cradlepoint. Cradlepoint is the leading provider of cloud-based wired, wireless WAN networking solutions for distributed and mobile enterprises. And our second Ken is Ken Mills. Ken Mills is the CEO of IntelliSite, and with an early background in nuclear physics and reactor engineering, and over 20 years of business-to-business technology and information security expertise, Ken serves as the Chief Executive Officer of IntelliSite, the industry's most dynamic open software suite of IoT, AI, and sensors for mid-market and large enterprise customers, global technology partners, and governments worldwide. All right, Paul, take it away.
Well, thank you, Alyssa, and thank you to the iMiller team for putting this together for us. We greatly appreciate all the hard work that your team's put into this. Thanks again for everyone joining. Once again, I am Paul Fatuccia, General Manager and President of ANS Advanced Network Services. I want to thank everybody out there also for taking the time today to join the state-of-the-art technology webinar focusing on the human-based monitoring platform, which pulls together a bunch of different resources, including the Cradlepoint transport product, as well as some other technologies as well. Really, this has been put together to kind of combat the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's why it's coming out so much, but there's so many other applications besides that that can be utilized. But today we're going to talk about a couple use cases and how the Cradlepoint products as well as the IntelliSite products actually work together to deliver that service. We here at ANS are grateful for the opportunity to share this information with you all and to bring the perspective from both Cradlepoint and IntelliSite. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to Ken Hosick, and he's going to run through his presentation, and then we'll go over to Ken Mills, and then we'll do a little cleanup on the end and ask for some questions. So Ken, Take it away.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. And what I'm going to do is I'll go through a quick intro to Cradlepoint, and I'm going to go through some of the other use cases that we're seeing just from a very high level, and then turn it over to IntelliSite to do a deep drill. But we believe at Cradlepoint, we are the worldwide leader in solutions that enable enterprise to use cellular as an enterprise WAN, wide area network. That's what WAN stands for. It's essentially internet connection. And we have been around for about 15 years. We are in 75% of the top worldwide retailers. We're in 40% of the Fortune 500, 50% of the Fortune 100, and all of the top 25 US cities with our solutions that leverage today 4G LTE going on 5G as an enterprise WAN. So if you go to the next slide, we're seeing that our belief at Cradlepoint is if the world can be wireless, the WAN can be wireless, it will be. And we saw this with the LAN, the local network with Wi-Fi. It's just such an easier solution. But if you look at the early days of wireless and compare that with the options that a lot of the distributed enterprises have, you have 18,000 branch offices across the US, you don't always have the benefit of fiber in your going to your branch. And so in the early days, cellular was pretty much just had enough bandwidth to put text messages on a BlackBerry. And then eventually it got to the point where you could see web pages, and then you could see pictures, and then videos. And then the next thing you know, you can run an office. I think the two considerations that we're seeing with cellular as an enterprise WAN is the throughput and data caps. And I think, as you can see from this graph, the throughput continues to grow every year to the point where we're all have gigabit LTE availability, and 5G is being deployed on the network side and soon to be deployed on the device side. But one of the issues over the past has always been data caps. And in the early days, the networks didn't have the capacity to be able to handle a large amount of data. And as the carriers prepare their networks for 5G, one of the most significant things that they've done over the last 4 or 5 years is they've added that capacity in the ground, the wires in the ground to connect all of those new cell towers, because especially millimeter wave, you need that density. And essentially the operators are saying, bring it on. We want to go after those applications that require a lot of data. So now that and that was one of the best things about what they've been doing for 5G is adding that capacity. That's available today with gigabit LTE. So we don't have to wait for 5G to get the benefit of that. And, but we're seeing a trend away now from data caps and more towards data rate subscription. So maybe I'll buy a 50 megabit per second data plan for X dollars, or if I want to spend a little bit more, maybe I can buy 100 megabit per second or even 500 megabit per second. And that's all available today. And that's really changed the way that enterprises are now able to use cellular. And again, this is one of the reasons why we think you're going to see a lot more use cases within enterprises going cellular. So if you go to the next page, if you look at the enterprise adoption of cellular, we're seeing it in 3 segments. It's these fixed locations, such as retail stores, branch offices, quick serve restaurants, convenience stores, mobile locations. And so these are a lot of first responder vehicles, so police cars and fire trucks, as well as public buses, transit or school buses, or even snow plows. And then on the last category, IoT is the Internet of Things, IoT machines. We're seeing it range in kiosks, ATMs, digital signage, surveillance cameras, smart city applications, traffic intersections, a wide range, but it's very, very widely adopted. So if you go to the next slide, now I'm going to bring it to the current situation that we're in. And basically, people want to go back to work. We've seen how this has devastated our economy. People want to get back, basically restore jobs, rejuvenate the economy. And enterprises and public entities are looking at how can I do that in a way that creates a safe work environment in today's situation. And so what I'm going to do is go through some examples at a high level again of some of how enterprises are using technology to create safer work environments, create safer environments, and try to accelerate this return to work. So if you go to the next page, as we return to work, we're seeing facilities managers look at technology to help spread people out. So this is an example of a parking garage where they're using the solution to direct cars to places in the parking lot where the cars aren't, where it isn't that dense, and it may be a different floor, et cetera. And we're finding that, whether it's a parking garage or other types of facilities like that, that there's some benefits that you get obviously by spreading people out and try to, really reduce those density hotspots. On the next slide is another solution that is a security monitoring solution. So they combine a lot of cameras that can be deployed in large areas. And this could be a shopping mall, it could be a park, it could be an enterprise campus. And just using it to maintain situational awareness without having to actually have people out there to identify when you might start to have a large gathering, or to identify unsafe behaviors, density, situations where people are too dense. And so this is another example of using technology to help create safer environments. On the next slide, we have a lot of business with retail chains. These are companies that have retail stores and sell things online. And what we're seeing is a lot of our customer-facing, these entities that have customer-facing solutions are looking at using things like kiosks to maybe, offload some of the transactions from a human clerk or agent over to more of a self-service model. And we're also seeing this being used for remote expertise. So you can set this up and be able to use this kiosk to talk to a remote expert. So you don't have to have that face-to-face interaction. On the next one is an example of using secure connectivity for outdoor digital signage. And this is important when you have, and in this case, this is a beach closure. But as people are dealing with an ever-changing world, and and policies are changing on a regular basis, the ability to modify the content and be able to control a lot of this remotely has been very, very attractive. And in some cases, these are temporary networks, and this is, again, where cellular can really help. So on the next slide, getting to kind of the branch application, and I use that word IoT, Internet of Things. We're seeing a lot of enterprises that are interested in adding sensors, IoT sensors, to their networks, or to create a network for those IoT sensors that can measure room occupancy, maybe for conference rooms or office space, have the ability to detect people density, the ability to detect cleaning schedules, both on the doors coming in, but also the restrooms, and using this technology to really, again, create safer environments. And a lot of these use cases, the enterprises don't necessarily want to add these systems to their corporate network, maybe their enterprise network. If you're a bank, why would I put this on my secure financial network if I don't have to? A lot of times in a different world, that might require an 8-month security review, and we don't have that time, obviously, as we roll this out. So we're seeing a lot of enterprises that really want to set up these solutions on a completely separate network, just so it's physically air-gapped, physically separate from the corporate network, so you don't really have to worry about doing that security review. So having said that, the last use case that I left out was a human-based monitoring solution that IntelliSite has developed. And I thought it would be really good to have Ken Mills from IntelliSite, the CEO, go through and do a deep dive on that one. So Ken, over to you.
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it. Not very often I get a handoff from Ken, so it's great to have another one on the call. And as you guys have questions or thoughts, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I know we'll have some for Q&A, but feel free to distract me with chat questions as we go. IntelliSite has been around for 20 years, solving industrial IoT solutions and delivering video surveillance, IoT, AI products for our customers and partners for, again, over 20 years. And we recently acquired a artificial intelligence company that's helped us build an advanced solution around human-based monitoring. If you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. And we call it all-in-one human-based monitoring because it's not just about the thermal camera, it's about the whole solution and how it integrates together with the cloud-based management, artificial intelligence, and bringing that all together in a solution for our customers. And on the next slide, you'll see kind of the 4 components that really make up a quality implementation. Again, the camera, super important, but not the only piece. AI greatly simplifies the usability. Managed services, after the fact, partnering with ANS to help ensure you have a successful project. And then enterprise fleet management, user management, advanced data integrations. All these things are often required by the 100 plus customers we've done this solution with, over and over again, we get questions and comments that, what do I do beyond thermal? How do I integrate this with the rest of my infrastructure? And then first and foremost, we often get, how do I start? And, the mobile cart, which is on the next slide, is really where most of our customers start. So they start with an all-in-one solution at the edge that has all of the functionality necessary to successfully deploy the environment. So it includes the outstanding Cradlepoint router that you just heard, which gives us a software-defined network, which connects all the devices on the cart, gives us remote access, tracking ability, remote support, as well as protects the devices from a security point of view, all together built into that Cradlepoint router. And the vast majority of our customers implement the LTE connectivity provided by Cradlepoint as part of the solution for a couple reasons. As we talked about, the software-defined network capabilities, being able to physically track it across your site, being able to use it as primary communication. Maybe you want to get it out there rapidly and you do not want to put it on your corporate network. So being able to have that Cradlepoint connectivity as a primary connectivity access to this device is often a common use case, as well as allowing my company to provide remote diagnostics and support of these mobile carts as they're deployed throughout a customer's facility. So all of that can be driven by the cart itself. All the data is maintained on the cart. All of the AI is done on the cart. All the processing of the thermal decisions and alerting is done on the cart. So none of the privacy of the customer data or the faces that are scanned are sent anywhere else but on your premises. So you have complete control over all of the data that comes from the system. And then we also have the ability to extend the cart to a centralized configuration, which allows you to keep all the same software components, hardware components that I just described, which is the next slide, to integrate into maybe 10, 20 cameras at a site and provide the same functionality that you get on the cart, but more in a traditional data center architecture and data center type implementation. So you could move the cart or the camera from a mobile cart to a permanent install, and it really allows you to move forward with the implementation maybe as this becomes a permanent need within your facility. So if we go to the next slide here. Most people are unsure how thermal cameras actually work from a detection perspective. So these are two screenshots that we have from the camera manufacturer that we recommend. And what you see here on the left-hand side is a couple gentlemen wearing glasses. So the first gentleman's wearing sunglasses, and it's unable to detect his temperature in his through his sunglasses, so it's looking at his nasal passage. This gentleman next to him has regular glasses that aren't tinted, and still unable to get the temperature through his glasses, so it's also looking at his nasal passage. And this young lady here at the end, she's not wearing glasses, and so you can see that it's looking to get the temperature from her inner eye, which is where the thermal system prefers to look for the temperature. That's where you can get the best and most accurate temperature reading if you have access to that inner eye. But the thermal camera will look anywhere it can on the face to get the best reading and the highest reading possible to initiate an event. So it could be on the forehead, it could be the inner eye, as you see here, it could be the nasal passage, it could be the neck area here, which I can show you in some examples. And this is how the camera works within milliseconds, scanning these people as quickly as it can to get the best temperature. And then most people actually turn on what's called the color overlay that allows you to see the cool thermal colors that most people like to see in real life. And it gives you the same kind of information as to where the heat is versus where it's cool within this individual. And right here in this corner here is what's called a black body. And in some cases, we recommend that you deploy a black body with the thermal camera, which gives it a consistent temperature reference. So this is set at an exact temperature, and the camera always knows exactly what this temperature is. And then based on that temperature, it can reference all the other temperatures in the scene and determine, in some cases more accurately, what the body temperature is to provide the right level of alerting. It's not always required, but where it is required, we absolutely recommend it and do provide it. So you have an option depending on your type of environment, whether it's a traditional indoor environment with very consistent temperature variables, then you may not need the black body. If you are close to a door or maybe a indoor-outdoor area, not quite outdoors, you may require the black body, or if you have uneven temperature systems, or you need extremely accurate temperature readings, then we would recommend the black body. So if you look at the next part of the system is really designed around highly customizable user interfaces. So these user interfaces are built on the IntelliSite platform, can be customized by you, the user, to look how you want them to look. You do not have to come back to us to build these custom dashboards. They're widgets that can be dragged and dropped and moved and out of the system. So you can create, on the bottom left, one of our customers is using it to track all of the systems that they have deployed from a thermal perspective and want to know where it is physically on the property. They have large campuses. They want to make sure they know where the cart is at all times using the Cradlepoint GPS location. And we have this tied into the actual geolocation of that cart, so this updates real time. So if the cart starts to take off towards Las Vegas here, you can get a feel for, you could get notified and make sure that it doesn't get too far before you need to go retrieve it. Or you could have more of an alarm-based interface, as you see on the bottom right, which is also a project we worked with Cradlepoint on, where we can put IoT sensors for refrigeration control for pharmaceuticals and things like that inside a hospital or other places, and then we can alert based on temperatures out of band, so that you can ensure that you have safe medicine or freshest groceries or whatever the case might be. So these are just some of the examples of where you could bring IoT and thermal together. The rules engine, which is the next slide here, is also a huge differentiator from the IntelliSite platform perspective. Is it allows us to create advanced policies and the rules associated with those policies and what happens after an event occurs. So if you have a high temperature, do you want to fire off a green light or a red light? Do you want to have an audible alert? Do you want to send a REST API to a third-party application? Do you want to send a message? All these different things can be controlled by the rules engine, and you can create what we call rule chains, which are integrating a couple different rules together in a notification type process. As you can see here, there's a number of different things that can happen based on a high temperature or normal temperature situation. So we have customers in a normal temperature situation may want to display a green light, or they may want to print a green badge that expires after the 24 hours or 12 hours, so that someone gets a new badge every day or a sticker every day that says that they've been scanned. So there's a number of different ways that you can integrate this rules engine into your workflow to automate or improve the overall process. And if you look at the next slide, I'll just kind of touch on a couple more. One of the most common ones we see is someone wants to get an email, a phone call, a text. If there's an alert, they want to integrate with HR databases or other access control solutions using data integration from Kafka or AWS or MQTT or Spark. And if these don't mean anything to you, these names, that's okay. They're just different data languages that we can integrate with that can talk to many, many other systems that you might have in your facility. And we can do things like also fleet management. So is the battery backup properly charged? Is the router connected? Is the PC running the way it's supposed to be? Is the monitor on or off? We actually had a customer today that had an issue with they couldn't see the camera, and it was actually because the monitor was off. So we had a fleet management alert that said, hey, the monitor's off. If you turn it back on, you'll be able to see the video as you intended. So simple things like that, in ensuring that we can manage the whole health and wellness of the system. So if you look at the next slide here, we have an example of kind of how people are coming through a facility. You can hit the play button there, thank you. And this is not how I would recommend deploying a solution. You really want to be people coming through, like with the ropes you see here, and you more or less want them looking at the camera directly, not in the side view here. But what I do like about this, if you could pause it when that gentleman gets in the middle there, that'd be great, if it's possible. Maybe the next one. We'll just pause it here once I get in there. Oh, you're back up. Good job. So it's hard being the slide controller when you're not used to the video. There you go. Right there. It's perfect. So if you look here, you have the crosshairs grabbing his tear duct, right in his eye area, getting the best temperature as he's walking through. So again, this doesn't give us a lot of face to be able to scan here, because it only has the side of his face, so you only have a couple chances to get the best reading, which is that tear duct, as we mentioned. So again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this particular configuration, but it's a good way to show people walking through and how the thermal camera tries to capture the real temperature, real-time temperature of the individuals as they pass through. So if you hit play, that'd be great. So you can see him kind of come through, and I don't know if you kind of caught that. You can see here it'll start, boom, it grabs his tear duct, it grabs his tear duct, and then when they take off the mask, it's hot because they're breathing in the mask here. You can see how the temperature jumps up, and it's now looking at where their mask was, and they continue on. And this young lady here has no idea what we're doing, but she's going to walk through, and boom, it grabs her tear duct and starts scanning her as she walks through the facility. So, one of the things that we found in real life that is if you hang your mask on a rear view mirror and you're driving around in the summer, right, that mask could be 115 degrees. So if you're deploying this in your facility, we'd recommend that you tell folks, especially if you're requiring them to wear a mask, that they do not hang the mask from their car and get it baking in the sun. One, it's much more uncomfortable to wear, but two, when they come in, the thermal camera is going to see that and say, hey, that mask is over 100 degrees. It's going to fire off a false alarm. You have to do a secondary measurement, which we always recommend, and you're kind of wasting everybody's time. So as a best practice, we recommend that you tell folks to remove their glasses and hats if possible, not hang their masks on the rear view mirror, and to set the camera up where it's looking directly at the individual as they come into the facility. So if you go to the next slide, please, final slide here. Actually, next final slide. So here's an event where this one's perfect. So I'm just kind of wrapping up my time. What we found by the numbers as we've deployed these solutions is that these systems save a ton of money versus doing this manually. They greatly reduce the amount of time it takes to scan. And by adding additional things like mask compliance, people occupancy counting, and things of that nature with the platform, you can add a lot more functionality to the system beyond what thermal can provide on its own. So it's part of the tools in your tool bag to help you respond and get people back to work as quickly as possible. So a lot more detail than this that we can provide, but this is hopefully a great introduction to the system and what we can do, and we're happy to answer questions as we go in this presentation. I think we're passing it on to back to ANS here.
Thank you, Ken and Ken. If we have some questions now, we can take them. If not, we'll continue on with the presentation.
We actually do have a couple of questions. This question is for Ken Mills. What are your best practices? And I know it's an open-ended, so I'm not sure what our viewers were asking specifically. So maybe a broad sense of your best practices.
A great question. It's a very common one. So some of the ones I've mentioned already, and just kind of reiterate, you definitely want to ask people to remove the glasses and hats if at all possible. We did have a customer who was pretty frustrated with us. They had someone with a hat, glasses, and a mask, and we were unable to get an accurate temperature reading of that individual. And the reality is we didn't have anything to scan, right? There was no skin or a tear duct or forehead or anything that the system could actually get an accurate measurement of. So it gave an unusually low temperature because it was just kind of scanning the overall, person versus the actual face. And so that's something we definitely recommend. Granted, not everybody can take off their glasses because they need them to see, but if they have sunglasses, if they can remove their hat, those kinds of things will ensure, success. We also, as people come into a facility, if they're being scanned, as they're walking through a line, we want to make sure that you give people a way to egress that line so they're not blocking the person behind them, so that the next person can be scanned properly as they come into the building. So that's something that we see where maybe you have too many people in the scene or too many people blocking the people behind them, and therefore the camera, for the same reason, can't quite pick up enough detail on that individual to provide a proper measurement and proper results. And then, the last thing is, we don't want to put the system underneath an air conditioner or too close to a fan or something of that nature where the system cannot calibrate based on the ambient temperature. So you want to have kind of consistent temperature for at least a few minutes so that the camera can properly calibrate and measure the folks that are coming in. So it's not like a traditional CCTV camera where you just kind of stick it up and forget it. It does take a little bit of TLC to ensure that the optimum performance occurs and that you get the optimum and most accurate measurements. So those are the things that typically we see that customers, if they don't kind of keep those in mind, they could have less than optimal performance, and that's not what we want. Good
Great.
question.
Thank you. We do have a couple of more questions. When you're doing your temperature checks, we have a question. What other data points is the system grabbing, and are there any data privacy concerns?
Yeah, another question I get asked every time. I should probably put a slide on it. So data privacy is a big deal, and the fact that we do not move any of the data off the customer premises is a big part of the way that we support that privacy. We also are not capturing any personal identifying information other than the temperature associated with the face, but we're not associating that face with a name. The only thing we keep from our cloud point of view is the username and email. Other than that, there is no other personal information kept on our cloud platform. So all of the AI, all of the alerting and scanning and messaging that goes on is all happening locally on-prem. So all of that data is under your control and under your premises.
Great. And a similar, I guess it's a follow-up question to that. Someone missed a part of the presentation and wanted to know if people need to be informed that they're being scanned.
Sorry, my phone glitched on you on that one. Can you repeat that one more time?
Of course. Someone missed part of the presentation, so they'd like to know if people need to be informed that they're being scanned.
Yeah, that's not a question necessarily for me. It's more of a policy decision. Most of our customers are informing people that they are being scanned. Most of our customers, kind of go back to the best practice question, that's a great best practice as well. Most of our customers are putting signs as people enter that they are being scanned, and that by entering you consent to be scanned. So there's definitely some good recommendations, good housekeeping kind of policies that a lot of customers are following to properly inform and ensure that they have knowing consent that someone's temperature is being taken. But that's again not something that my system would do necessarily, but definitely a good best practice for any owner operator to ensure that they're putting proper signage.
And I would say it probably depends on whether you're an enterprise and this is for your workers, or if this is a business and you're open to the public and you're doing this on customers, or a public entity. And it also is going to depend on which state you're in, frankly.
It's a great point. We have another question here. So what connectivity requirements are there, and what is the standard deployment timeframe?
So for the cart itself, typically it takes about an hour to put the cart together from scratch if you're doing it yourself or having a technician do it. That's usually about how long it takes. The longest part is doing a little bit of calibration and making sure you find the right location as to where you want to create the scanning, so you kind of create that sweet spot and that traffic flow. So we've installed systems in an hour to 2 hours, kind of start to finish, and then it could take several hours the rest of that day to make sure you get the traffic flow set up properly and people are entering and exiting the lane in the right manner. So the biggest challenge often is traffic flow, not so much the technology. So that, again, takes about an hour to two to set it up from scratch, and then usually an hour or so to set up the workflow unless you've already done it ahead of time. A lot of hospitals and places we've worked on, they've done a good job putting stickers on the floor of telling people where to walk and where to stand. They've created literally those movie-style barriers to make sure people know exactly where to walk and where to follow. Those kinds of things ensure success and ensure you get the best quality scans and best quality temperature readings. That's stuff that we typically recommend. From a connectivity perspective, since all of the video and all of the data is being managed there on-prem, the connectivity is mostly for ensuring that the health and wellness of the system is where it should be, being able to remote in and provide updates, whether it's a firmware update or software package update or something of that nature. So with the Cradlepoint router, we can use the standard 4G LTE connectivity that the Cradlepoint router provides and give plenty of performance to do all the things that we need to do across the U.S. so far. We haven't run into a situation where we, quote, needed 5G. Now, if you wanted to stream the video across from the mobile cart using the router, you could absolutely do that, but you would need to upgrade to faster than 4G connectivity to do so.
And I'll just add, the connectivity is all pre-configured out of the box. So that's what we like about zero touch deployment. I mean, the time to bring up the connectivity itself is the time for it to, to plug in the unit and boot the router, and then you're connected.
Yeah. We have an engineering question for you, Ken, or for you, Paul. When engineering or designing the solution for a building, are there any considerations that you would recommend?
Which Ken were you asking?
You can, Ken Hosick.
Well, and Paul, you can help me on this. I think if you're I'm just thinking through, it's a broad, open-ended question, but if you're looking at how to design this for a given building, I think first thing I would look at is, do you own the lobby or not? Because if this is your own building, you have a lot more control over it as opposed to if you're sharing it with maybe other tenants. And in both cases, I think that from a networking standpoint, if it's a shared lobby and maybe you're having your employees go through, or you're enabling other tenants to leverage the same solution, that's where having a separate network really helps, just to have it completely separate from all the other enterprise networks. In general, you don't connectivity problems. If you're talking about 4G LTE, you're not going to have any problems with the signal penetrating the building. So that's not an issue. And like I said, it's zero touch configuration. So everything, pretty much all you do is supply power and you're good to go.
Yeah, and I would concur with that. Ken Mills actually brought up several of the best practices on the placement of the unit. So I think that is a primary concern. And then also, if it is a multi-tenant facility, in the case of which we have done one, you do have to, it is good to have that as a separate network.
Excellent, thank you. So, question for you, Paul. You do a lot of these integrations for customers. How are you working through those integrations, and what does that look like for them?
Sure. So, basically how we go to our customer is really a fact-finding mission up front to try to evaluate what their real needs are before we present any kind of proposal to them as far as what they're to meet their criteria for their needs. So that's really number one. Number two is, how do we deploy? And we look at a couple different parameters. So if it's a smaller organization that doesn't have necessarily the resources on staff to do that, then we can bring all the resources necessary to complete the mission. That could be the design up front, the various software platforms that are required, the various hardware, and then also the maintenance monitoring on the back end if they choose to utilize that functionality. If they're larger organizations, in some cases, they may have a robust IT staff or a pretty strong, facilities group that could pull wires, things of that nature. Then we kind of take the pieces that they don't want to do and we'll do them for them. And then they can take the pieces that they feel comfortable doing and they take them. So it's really a customized solution for the end customer. So as an example, we had, and this is kind of away from this use case, but where we were deploying a DAS system and the customer had the ability to source the equipment once we did the design from the manufacturer, because they had, were able to leverage their relationship in government contracts to be able to acquire that equipment. They also had the ability to implement the cabling associated with the project because they did have electricians on staff that were able to perform that function. So what we really did as part of the package was to do the design up front, data capture, put a solution together for them, basically build a bill of materials and a scope of work for them to perform the functions they needed to do. They went in, installed the equipment in their head end. They also did the cabling, hung the antennas, and then on the back end, what we did is the carrier coordination and verified that their installation met the standards that the carrier would use to actually jump on the system and give them service. And then on the back end, we actually provided the maintenance and monitoring and monthly reporting, and then some quarterly and annual stuff as well as part of the solution. So that's really our go-to-market strategy. We really try to customize the needs of the customer to what they are looking to buy and which pieces they can supply. If they need a full turnkey, we can do that. And then, we can also supply them various components.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I found this really interesting and helpful, especially because, there's a lot of worry out there. So I really appreciate ANS, Paul, you and your team, your partners, Ken and Ken, bringing us this program. It was interesting, informative, and a viable solution to help people feel safe as they return to business as normal. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know what? I did get just one more question for you. That's always the case, right? So have you done any deployments using CBRS as a backhaul? It sounds like an ideal use case for CBRS for security and offload. So we can end on CBRS. It's a great question, actually.
Sure. So Ken Hosick and I could probably talk to this one. So we have. And it's actually at an amusement park in New Jersey. It's actually a amusement park and retail facility, and it's indoors. And so basically, we deployed a DAS system for the end customer, and then we utilized the Cradlepoint technology that's out there, where we needed to get various parts of the parking lot for IoT, security, signage, and kiosks, things of that nature. So we were able to, well, stepping back a second, the parking lot had been blacktop. So, initially they were thinking that they were going to have to cut up the blacktop in this parking lot, and I believe it covers around 400 acres, and to actually deploy conduit so that they could pull power and signal cable. Now, luckily they had power already in place in that facility, and what they were really lacking was a conduit system for the cabling to support any kind of devices that they would put out there. So that's when we turned to Cradlepoint with their solution in Geoverse as well, to actually deploy kiosks and some signage, electronic signage, as well as security cameras. And that was kind of the first phase of the deployment. So we were able to save the customer roughly a couple $1 million in construction costs by just utilizing the wireless technology of CBRS with the Cradlepoint products. And then as a backup, also utilize the Geoverse to communicate back to the head end in the facility. So that's what we have been involved in.
And JMA Wireless was heavily involved in that too. So.
That's correct from the DAS perspective. Does that answer the question?
Sure does. Yeah, thank you so much. Paul, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to share with us. We do have your contact information here for anyone who's interested to learn about this solution or anything else ANS does, anything that IntelliSite does or Cradlepoint. Please contact Paul. His team will be more than happy to help you. Paul, I'll let you have the last word.
Sure. So once again, this is one of our practice areas, and we're very fortunate to have both Cradlepoint and IntelliSite as part of our partner list to be able to deploy custom services for our customers. So we thank you guys. We appreciate your time. It takes a lot to put some of these together, as well as the iMiller team. We appreciate all the effort, Alyssa and Jen, that you've done to put this together. And also a shout out to Denise on my marketing team that also works diligently to put a lot of this stuff together on our behalf. So thank you. Please be safe out there as you travel the countryside or the world, and know that we're all with you in trying to keep everybody safe out there.
You got it. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for being here. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.